we are going to go to Lancaster. I don't know whether Natalie's in Lancaster. Where are you, Natalie? Where are you based? You're not nowhere near Lancaster, probably. You're probably in Timbuktu or something.
I'm actually in Preston.
In Preston. Oh, so not a million miles away.
Not too far from Lancaster.
All right. And I'm going to get your slides up in a second. But as I said, Natalie is involved in the Lancaster Literary Festival. And I'm going to invite her to tell us a bit about herself and tell us a bit about what's going on there this year. So over to you, Natalie.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much for inviting me to join this. I wasn't expecting that when I posted in your Facebook group, but it was a nice surprise. Thank you for having Lancaster Litfest. I know we're not in Cumbria technically, but we are very close to the border, and we have had a lot of Cumbrian links over the years. So a little about me first. I act as the marketing officer for Lancaster Litfest, but I am actually a volunteer member of the board. We don't have any full-time staff, which I think most of you will nod along with, and we haven't had for some time. So we're a volunteer-led organisation. In my day jobs, I work for Lancashire County Council as a library assistant. I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a genealogist. I'm a woman of many hats, essentially, of which Litfest has been one since 2012. So I'm going to give you a little potted history of Litfest before I get into what we're doing this year, because it's amazing how many people don't know we exist, even though we've been around for a very long time. So as you can see on the screen, we were established in 1978. And the first festival was called Writing 78 and had the likes of Seamus Heaney, John le Carré, all the greats at the time, of quite a male spectrum, because that was the way publishing was at the time. Indeed, I think the only woman was Fleur Adcock. Thankfully, that's changed and developed over the years as the festival's grown and diversity has increased. But since 1978, we've had an annual festival pretty much every year. We've been involved in all sorts of different projects. At one point, we were regularly funded by Arts Council. We had creative producers, programmers, marketing people, photographers, all sorts of local creatives involved. You've probably, if you've wandered around Lancaster, if you've been in the Story, if you've been up and down the coast near Morecambe, you will have seen Litfest projects. The mythical Coast Trail was inspired by a book that we published called The Sea Swallow. So Mary Shell and many of the fantastic sculptures along that coast are from one of our books. So Litfest is everywhere, although we're very quiet sometimes. I think many people and many organisations had a big shift around 2012 when Arts Council did its giant shuffle, and we lost our regular funding, we lost our staff, and clung on by our fingernails, really, because we're just very stubborn. So we went from a large office, large staff, regular funding, to ultimately at one point a board of 6 people in our in one of our board members' back rooms and meeting every so often. But we've built back from there. I joined the festival just as we lost funding. Please don't take that as being my fault, honestly. I was just a volunteer at that point, and I joined as a board member in 2013 while I was still doing my degree at Lancaster University. We've had lots of different board members over the years. Some of them you might have worked with. Jacqueline Greaves was our chair of board for a very long time, and our current chair is Julie Bell, who is also from Lancashire County Council and Guiding UK, Garstang Children's Festival. We've had lots of different board members, teachers, journalists, arts creatives, you name it, they've been on the board at one part or another. Last year, our board went down to 5 again, led by Julie Bell, with me, Jake Hope, who's like a children's literacy lead, Emma Crichton, who works in Barrow, she's at CGP, Bill Swainson, who was actually involved in the first Litfest and went away for many years and then came back from the wilderness to us, who's worked as an editor for Bloomsbury and various other companies. Who have I missed? Me, Julie, Emma, Bill, Jake. No, that was everyone. And you may have seen out online our call out for new board members. So our ranks are swelling and we should be up to 11, which we hope to announce soon with some very exciting new partners. We're still board led. We're still a volunteer organisation, but we've managed to get a 7-hour per week office manager to help support us. And some fantastic freelancers work with us for a few days each year, including Ros Forster, who you might have worked with before. She's our marketing supremo who makes sure that I don't go mad when it comes to the festival. Brilliant project managers like Lisa Keys or Natalie Bowers, finance officers like Dawn Diaz have all helped us get to where we are now. We were sort of building back, we were starting to do arts projects, and then COVID struck. We were one of those organisations that was mid-festival when COVID came and locked everybody down. So we managed possibly 2 events of our 2020 festival and then we were gone. We came back strong though in 2021. We decided that if we couldn't do what we used to do, we would do something different. And we did an entirely online, entirely free festival in March 2021, which was fantastic. And we managed to have people from all over the world in our audience because it was online, because you could watch on catch up, because it was free. And that was eye-opening, really. And whilst the world has opened up more and we've moved back in many ways to in-person events, we've tried to maintain that hybridity. So wherever possible, we live stream our events. Litfest 2023 is almost entirely hybrid, so it's in person and online for pretty much everything, with the exception of a couple of guided walks like around Lancaster, which would be quite hard to film, and an online book club with a Norwegian writer called Roy Jacobson, which has to be entirely online because Roy is in, I think, Norway, and we're in Lancaster, so that would be a bit difficult to do entirely in person. So next slide, Tom, please. Okay, these are some of the festivals that we've done over the years. I say that we do an annual festival in March, but we are also trying to do a smaller autumn weekend, which primarily focuses on local writers. So we've had some fantastic Cumbrian writers at that, including Karen Lloyd, Polly Atkin, Beth Pipe, all sorts of fantastic writers. And indeed, we have some Cumbrian writers such as Katie Hale at our festival this year. Next slide again, Tom. Okay, so I've already talked about hybridity. I've already talked about, as usual, we're doing this on a shoestring with no full-time staff. We haven't got any Arts Council funding this year, but we have managed to get some little pots of grants here and there, and with a lot of time, volunteering time, we strongly believed that we needed to do this festival free with donations again. We'd gone back to ticketing in 2022, but with the cost of living crisis, the arts was becoming a rare privilege for some. It was something people couldn't afford. If you're choosing between heating your home and going to a literature event, we all know which one's going to win. And we didn't believe that people should have to do that. So we've taken the decision to make the entire festival free to access, asking for donations where people can, so that those who could not attend if they had to pay can, and those that could attend and could even give us £5 can. We've made accessibility key to us, whether that's accessibility through finance or accessibility through not being able to come to an event in person due to health issues, caring responsibilities, travel issues with many trains on strike. We're trying to maximise our audience and our accessibility as much as possible. And we're using the inclusion guide as our guiding light in that. We're not 100% there yet, but we're getting there. So Litfest 2023, as you can see from the programme on the screen, starts on the 17th and finishes on the 26th of March officially. but we have an International Women's Day special event with Cass Simpson on the 8th. We also have post-festival events with Linton Kwesi Johnson, and indeed the Lancaster Environment Lecture way down in May with George Monbiot, which we do in partnership with Lancaster University, is already fully booked. We had a 400-seat lecture theatre, which is just packed already, and we're hoping that that will be reflected in the rest of the festival, though George obviously is a big pull. So a big part of what we're doing this year is also co-creation. We want our audiences to be involved in our festival, because there's no point performing a festival to an empty room. What makes Litfest is our audiences. And with that in mind, we've got a series of initiatives running alongside the events that you might expect to see in a programme. And if you can go to the next slide, please, Tom. The first of these is the Litfest Big Read. Now, this started in 2021 in our online festival with the fantastic Matt Haig and A.M. Dasu. At that point, we had a title for adults and a title for children. And we're inviting everybody in the Northwest region to pick a book and to read along and to share in the pleasure of reading. This year, we've changed that slightly, and we've done 2 children's titles. The wonderful Frank Cottrell Boyce's Noah's Gold is our title for 8 to 12-year-olds, and Cynthia Murphy's Last One to Die, which was a Lancashire Book of the Year Award nominee, is our title for sort of 11 to 12 to 15 to 16. We particularly wanted to focus on this age group because that's often when we lose readers. Children get to the library, get read to all through childhood and primary school if they're lucky, but once you get to high school, once you get to exams, reading goes. Reading for pleasure is gone until you have your own children or you retire in often, and I've definitely seen that in the libraries. So reading for pleasure and reading as a social activity that you can get involved in has been key to our festival. Okay, next slide, please, Tom. Another initiative that we're doing for the first time this year is we've got 4 writers in residence. We've got a reader in residence in Sophie Anderson, who's going to be helping children and parents with book recommendations, helping kids get back into reading, because any book is good. You don't need to read Ulysses. You can read whatever you like. Any book is fantastic if you read it for your own enjoyment. And Sophie herself is an author, so she is full of enthusiasm and ideas. Our next slide will show our next writer, which is A.C. Grayling, who is a fantastic philosopher, but who is really approachable. We've worked with him before. Indeed, one of the only events that happened in the 2020 festival was one of A.C. Grayling's at Lancaster Library, and that was packed. So the festival that never was, we've got Anthony back, thankfully, and he's going to be, in addition to doing his own event, he's going into schools. He's going to be talking, hopefully, to Lancaster Royal Grammar School sixth form, all 200 and something of them, about philosophy and life. And he's also doing a drop-in at a wonderful venue in Lancaster called the Herbarium, where anybody can come and talk about philosophy and ideas and anything they'd like to discuss. So that's our second writer. And on our next slide, we should have our third, which is Tim Birkhead, who we've worked with before. Tim's fantastic, full of enthusiasm, and he's got a long history as a naturalist, an ornithologist, a teacher. We've worked with him before, and he's back this time. He'll be judging another initiative I'm going to talk about later, which is our wildlife photography exhibition. He'll be talking about his own book, and he'll also be hosting a drop-in session with one of our partner organisations, which is Lancaster City Museum, at the launch of their new Animalia exhibit, to give anyone from any age the chance to ask any wildlife questions they want of a qualified professional. Whatever you've always wondered about animals, throw it to Tim and let's see what he can say. Our last writer in residence is the wonderful Cumbrian poet Katie Hale. Katie is going to be involved in the festival in many, many different ways. In addition to performing her own work at a double bill with Zafar Kanyal on our Poetry Day on Saturday the 25th of March. She'll also be hosting our co-creation project, which is this year called From Source to Sea. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. She'll also be running one of our events that is online only, which is a free 2-hour online workshop for poets of the Northwest region at any stage of their career, at any age, well, above 18, just to save us from DBS checks. And there's 15 places of that available and anyone can apply. One of the initiatives we did run in 2021 was the New Writing North workshops, and at that time we did fiction, poetry, nature writing, which was led by Karen Lloyd, and also translation. This year we can't afford to do that. We can't, but because we already had Katie and we know how great she is, we decided let's do poetry at the very least, and let's see what else we can do in the future. So that's our residencies program. I'm just keeping an eye. I think I've got another few minutes, so let's skip to the next slide, Tom. Okay. When you hear Litfest, you think books, but we're not just books, and there's many different ways to get involved with literature and ideas and reading, and one of those is art. And last year we ran our inaugural Litfest Wildlife Photography competition, and this is one of the winning photographs, which is fantastic. We got some beautiful photographs, and this time we've expanded that. We are showcasing, we will be showcasing 30 artists' work within the Story Gallery, and we're inviting submissions on that at the moment. There will be 3 winners in each age category. We're inviting submissions from those under 18 as well. And last year, our under 18 winner went around RSPB Leighton Moss and got a special guided tour to build their practice. There's some fantastic opportunities for the winners, as well as showcasing their work, showing a different way to engage with nature and literature and art. And hopefully it's going to be marvellous. From the standards of submissions I've already had through, I know it's going to be marvellous. Okay, next one. Okay, now I mentioned this briefly when I was talking about Katie Hale, but over the last couple of years, we've been doing poetry co-creation projects. So we set a theme. We've done This Place, This Planet, Poetry in Place, Choice, all sorts of different things. And we've worked with poets such as Hannah Hodgson, Paul Farley, to select poems. We invite everyone to submit to usually a poetry map or a poetry mosaic along this theme. And this year we're doing From Source to Sea, which is all the rivers of the Northwest, particularly the Lune, because we're in Lancaster and that's our river. But we wanted to celebrate the fantastic diversity of water in our region. And this was inspired by another project that we are showcasing at the festival, which is River Tours, which is done in association with Sewing Cafe Lancaster, Stan's Cafe and Lancaster Arts. And they've done an amazing tapestry of the entire River Lune, which is why there is an embroidered river on our cover. So that has fed into our inspiration this year. And from those hundreds of poems that get submitted, our MC, which will be Katie Hale, will select 15 to be performed on the night. This is, apologies, that's a dog. This is one of the ways that we get to hear writers' new voices. That's a dog again. Because we can only showcase so many people in the festival. And as I'm sure anybody who's doing arts events knows, you don't have time to research everybody that's out there. You can't research everybody who drops in your inbox and says, can I read? You have to work out from your own contacts and from your own knowledge who will be best for the festival. But this is a new way to gain writers, and it's a new way to get involved in the festival and for them to feel like they make it themselves. Okay, next slide. I've already talked a little about New Writing Northwest, so I'm going to skip over this one, Tom. And I think that's me done. Thank you very much for listening, for my blathering. We kept it pretty tight to the 20 minutes. If anyone's got any questions, let me know. You can find everything about Litfest on www.litfest.org. We're on Twitter as @Litfest. We're on Facebook as Litfest Lancaster and Instagram, where you'll find a lot of my scheduled content going out and me in the background tearing my hair out. But we'll get there in the end, and it will be marvellous. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Natalie. If anyone's got any questions or wants to pick up on anything, then just put your hand up electronically or visually, and I'll catch you. Just looking at a couple of things in chat there. George saying, so good to hear access and cost addressed and continued online usage or use. And Amy saying, what a lovely idea to have a read in residence. That is a really nice idea. And it's a way of making sure that there is a wide selection of accessibility, I think, as well. And as Ian says, 3 residents covering philosophy, natural environment, and poetry, triple pillars of the world. Ian, you've got your hand up. Do you want to pick up there?
Yeah, if you don't mind. You said, thank you very much, by the way, it's fantastic. But you said audiences make Litfest, and given the changes that have happened since the loss of funding, but also COVID and your move to hybridity, what is happening to the audiences? I know it's a big question, but is there any kind of big? I know one thing you've said is it's gone international. That's great. I just think it's going to be a very powerful tool for Litfest to show how its accessibility and its impact is spreading. But I just wanted to add that in terms of audiences making Litfest, the other thing that makes Litfest is the ambition and the quality of what you do, which is palpably terrific. So that's one tool in terms of stakeholders and potential funding. I know you're not obsessed with funding, but it's something to bear in mind. The question is about the audiences. What has happened to them apart from the move to people further away?
I would definitely say that the audience numbers have swelled. We've definitely had a lot of people in the last couple of festivals in particular who've never attended a Litfest event before. One of the things we've really focused on is partner organisations. So I was talking about the River Tours session. That's with Sewing Cafe Lancaster. You wouldn't necessarily think that's an organisation that a literature festival is going to work with, but we held an event with them in our last festival, which was a reading and mending session, which was focused on, I think it was an Icelandic tradition. And that, I think we filled the Story Auditorium for that. We had some of the Sewing Cafe members sat down the side mending. We had audience members just listening and watching, and that was an absolutely amazing event. And we would have never had that audience if we had not partnered with that organisation. So the organisation's audiences are diversifying. We're hoping that they will diversify even further this year with the barrier removed of money, and Lord knows, yes, we do want the funding. We need the funding. So it's something to consider, everything you said. Thank you very much, Ian. But on the whole, the audiences are growing. The audiences' demographics are changing as well. We're getting some younger people in. Lancaster's a huge university city, but until we started working with the university and the schools directly, we didn't have that many young people attending. We'd sort of been bitten in the past by children's events, and we sort of swore off them for a while, but we're getting back there now. And our festival this year also includes a full day mini children's festival with events for children from 0 to 16 in Lancashire libraries in the Story. So audiences
does anybody
growing.
Underwrite the festival, Natalie? Well, how do you underwrite the festival?
Our only consistent funding is a small grant from Lancaster City Council, who we are incredibly grateful to, which keeps a roof over our head and lets us employ our office manager. We apply for small pots of funding. This year we've managed to get some from Heritage Lottery and other small local funders like the Elizabeth Wilson Trust and so on, who are helping with the residencies. But we're powered by volunteers' time, essentially, and everything that we raise, we use to ensure that our artists are paid a fair wage for coming to our festival and for their own involvement. We go off the Society of Authors guidelines for day rates, and we try to hit those wherever possible. We would love sponsors, and some of our local organisations take out ads in our programme, which I produce, and that all helps.
Yeah.
So there's no main sponsor. It's all sort of a patchwork of help wherever possible.
Okay.
And of course, usually our main income is tickets.
Yeah.
But we've not got that this year, so we're heavily in need of those donations.
Bizarrely, that'll make life a lot easier in some ways, not having to worry about tickets and stuff. But anyway, we're going to move on shortly, but Ian's got his hand back up again. Come off mute, Ian.
I was just going to ask the thorny question of publishers. Your involvement with them, do you keep them at arm's length, or are you looking for their support?
We try to work with our publishers wherever possible. Bill Swainson, who's another of our board members, who I said was an editor for many years, has got some extensive publishing network contacts. So he knows a lot of people who want to support festivals like this and who have authors out on the trail, new authors, established authors. So wherever possible, we work closely with publishers, especially independent ones as well.
Thanks, Ian. Good question. Derek.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. I'm interested in the way in which the loss of funding has possibly freed you, because so much time can be spent, in brackets, wasted by small organizations seeking funding and having to let the funding itself dictate what they choose to do. Does that make any sense?
That makes complete sense. I think losing our core funding made us rethink who we were as an organisation. I've never known Litfest as it was when it had regular funding, because I joined in the wake of the loss of it. So I don't really know what that's like. I don't know what an organisation with regular funding is. I've never had one. But it does free you, but you do also have that constant awareness that, can we make it to the next festival? Our main aim at the moment is to make it to our 50th, because this is our 44th. And how we're going to get there in the current environment, I don't know. We still will be applying for Arts Council funding on a project basis, but it does really focus you on what do you as an organisation want to do. If you're not being able to be paid to do it, if it's got to be what matters to you, it really does change your programming, and it really does change your whole approach. So yeah, it does free you, even though you then have the constant worry of looking at the bottom line.
I'm particularly interested because I live in Bassenthwaite. It's near Keswick, and have been involved with the literary festival at Theatre by the Lake for off and on
on
a number of years, and that's gone by the board now, because the organisation that run it has ceased to be, and it seems that, I mean, it's impossible to remove the problem of finance from running festivals, but there's a sort of tail and dog issue here, I think, and I'm delighted to learn of the approach you've taken, and wish you every success.
Thank you very much, Derek. I should say that another element of the funding is certain events are supported by our partner organisations, and that really helps. Lancaster University helped to fund the environment lecture, our international fiction lecture, and that really allows us to address that ambition that other people have talked about. without them, we would never have managed to get George Monbiot to do the environment lecture, because we just would not have had the money. So a sort of collaborative approach to funding has also been key, and that has helped with us having so many different partner organisations.
Okay.
Maybe that Litfest itself can't get as much, but if you work with others who can get different bits of funding, you can make something greater for the parts of the whole.
Yeah, relationships are so important, these sorts of things. Thank you ever so much, Natalie, for talking about the festival. Just a quick one from Verity. She's very excited about it, especially looking forward to Jill Liddington's talk about Anne Lister. She says she's seen a page about the book club on your website. Is the book club continuing this year?
The Litfest International Fiction Book Club is still going strong. That started on Zoom during lockdown, and it's continued on Zoom or on Crowdcast ever since. Our latest instalment of that at the festival will be the Roy Jacobson event, but it's running this month and every month for the foreseeable. And there's going to be a great slate of authors coming and their translators.
Excellent. Thank you for your question, Verity. Natalie, good luck again. Congratulations on what you've done so far. I love the graphic, by the way. I love the poster. It's lovely.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank you for liking my designs.
Pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. All right. Thank you, Natalie. Right. Let's go from books and words to opera and lovely stuff that Joe Davies is going to talk to us about. I told you about Joe earlier. I'll let Joe introduce himself and what the Cumbria Opera Group is while I get your slides up. So, Joe, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Nice to see you all. Nice to see lots of familiar faces. As Tom said, my name is Joe Davies, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Cumbria Opera Group. We're a group that have existed since 2016. But in those days, we were called the Eden Valley Opera Company. And then we expanded in 2019 to be what we are now, the Cumbria Opera Group. And the biggest thing we've done to date was in 2021, that was the Cumbria Opera Festival, which I'll talk a little bit about today. And we've got its sequel, as it were, the second Cumbria Opera Festival in August to September of this year. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. But the main thing I'm going to talk about today, and the reason why Tom kindly invited me on, was to talk about our composition competition. Try saying that 5 times in a row. And that's an exciting project we're doing this year, and hopefully many of you will be interested in that and know lots of young people who could be interested in applying to that project. So, as you can see in front of you, there's a few pictures of our Cumbria Opera Festival 2021. We actually came on this forum and just before, about a month before that project, and talked a little bit about it. And it happened. That was in September in 2021. The top row is our production of Così fan tutti, which happened in Grange and then in Penrith. It was set in the golden age of Hollywood, hence the kind of ornate kind of scenery behind the performers there, and the lights and the set and all that aspect to it. The middle row is a production of A Hand of Bridge, which is a 15-minute, very short 15-minute opera, literally about these 4 people playing bridge, and then they talk about their life and background, and it's a very interesting, quite dark opera. And then the bottom row was a production of Trouble in Tahiti. You can find out more about these past productions on our website, which someone's just posted on the chat. Thank you very much. That's cumbriaoperagroup.com. You can also watch little clips of Così fan tutti on there. So I do encourage you to have a look at that. That's some of our past work. And last year, we also did an outdoor opera project. Again, the photos are on our website. So as I say, we've been in this form since 2019, and the biggest thing to date has been that 2021 festival. So the next slide, please, Tom. A big part of what we do is our education and outreach department. We love going into schools to run workshops. And also when we do these big scale festivals and outdoor festivals and all that kind of thing, we also run our own in-house workshops for young people to attend and learn about opera and do singing and acting and just have a good time and learn about how they can get involved in opera generally. So as an example, I've just put a few photos of those workshops of the kind of 2 types of those workshops. So the top 2 photos are from our open festival workshop as part of the Cumbria Opera Festival 2021. That was a workshop that we ran on the first day of the festival. and it was led by the cast of Cosy Fan Tutti. So you'll see that top left-hand corner, that photo, the middle, quite tall man, there's a guy called Jonathan Hill, and he was playing Don Alfonso in Cosy Fan Tutti. So they led that workshop. Some really talented young Cumbrian teenagers came and created something really special. We kind of created a new scene in Cosy Fan Tutti, as it were, and they learned more about how they can get involved in opera generally. And then the bottom 3 photos are a different kind of workshop. That's where we go into schools and run singing workshops and drama workshops. That's in Appleby Primary School, which is quite special to me, actually, because that's my alma mater. That's the school I attended when I was growing up. So that was really cool to go back. We did a play in a day there. So we taught the kids lots of new songs, and then we encouraged them to find a story for those songs and slot it together. It was a very unusual story they came up with. I remember there being a shipwreck, I think, and I remember something about animals escaping from the zoo, and it was very bizarre, but it was hilarious, and they were really creative. So that was a great workshop to be a part of. We've done a lot of workshops last year and the year before, but that was just an example. And we've got a lot coming up this year. Loads in Kendal, Eden, quite a few in Barrow and Furness actually as well. So that's something really exciting that we're looking forward to. As we always say, and the same is true for lots of our organisations, education and outreach is really at the heart of everything we do. We want to make opera accessible and affordable, and we want to bring it to a wide variety of ages. So that's something we really enjoy, all those workshops. Next slide, please, Tom. And as part of that kind of education and outreach aspect to us, this is a young composers competition that we're putting on this year. We're doing on the 2nd of September, which is the last day of the festival, we're doing an event called Cumbria Opera and Song, which will be a celebration of Cumbrian poets and Cumbrian composers. So, you know, most obviously we're doing quite a lot of William Wordsworth settings, but also people like Ella Jarman Pinto, who's a fantastic Cumbrian composer. We're performing a couple of her songs. And we also thought it'd be great if we had some new Cumbrian music by some young Cumbrian creatives, which is why we're launching this composers competition. And it's for anyone 25 or under. We've just loosely said connection to Cumbria, but we're envisaging that it'll be someone who either grew up in Cumbria or is now living in Cumbria, or who was educated in Cumbria, someone who has a very definable link to Cumbria. And a thing to emphasize is we're not looking for kind of the finished article by no stretch of the imagination. We're just looking for someone who has ideas and someone who can create a work which is really exciting and can really add this Cumbria opera and song event. So it would be great if we had help from everyone on this call in spreading the word about this competition really, and any young people you know who could participate would be great. We're trying to not ask for much. The problem with a lot of competitions globally is that they ask for so much in the application process, and you know it just takes hours and hours to apply, and it's just unfair, I feel, on the prospective composers. So we're trying to ask for not much. We're asking for 3 things. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say that also Lucy Britton, who's our managing director, has also sneakily crept onto this call. So she's here if anyone wants to ask any questions later. She's somewhere in the other. So we're just asking for 3 little things. We're asking for the first page, just the first page of the composition which you want to be performed. So that'll be a composition for mezzo, soprano and piano. Just the first page, so not much to write, hopefully. Then we're looking for 1 previous composition that you've written. So it doesn't need to be anything new, it can just be from your existing canon, as it were, any length, any scoring, whatever you want. And then just a little brief introduction to who you are, your backgrounds, your plans for this composition. So it could say what text you're going to use, what you want it to be inspired by, you know, the extent to which it celebrates Cumbria, and then your connection to Cumbria. And after choosing the winner or winners, maybe, because nothing's off the table, we might choose a few winners if there's quite a lot of good entries, will receive a lot of mentoring with myself, the artistic director, and also with our associate composer, Jen Hartley. Next slide, please, Tom. Oh, is that it? Was that not on the slide? Oh, right, okay. Sorry. There was I must have not.
I'll see if I can dig it out, Joe, but I couldn't see it on the. But I'll carry on talking. I'll see if I can.
Oh, don't worry. It's not that important. It was just literally a photo of Jen Hartley, who's our associate composer. But if anyone wants to see what she looks like, just Google Jen Hartley and a photo will come up. But she's brilliant. She's absolutely amazing, and she will provide mentoring to the winning composer or composers. I'll also provide some sessions. So it really is kind of hopefully a big learning curve for the people. That's a photo of George Needham, who will be performing the composition along with Georgia Ellis, who's our mezzo soprano, who will be performing the competition on the 2nd of September. So lots of exciting plans, and as I say, it'd be great. We'd be very grateful if you help spread the word about these young composers competition opportunities, and hopefully we'll get a lot of entries and we'll really see the next big Cumbrian Mozart.
I love that you're doing this, Joe. It's fantastic, and I love the way it's set out and that you've thought about simplicity or whatever. Stu's got a question there. By the way, sorry about that last photo, Joe. My machine stopped working properly, so that's why we lost it. Just pondering, how does opera differ from musical theatre? Does the word opera put off some people? Not me, I hasten to add. I love everything from Wagner to Mozart to Britten and Birtwistle. Any reflections on that, Joe?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, there's so much overlap between opera and musical theatre that it's kind of become increasingly hard to define the difference. I guess historically it would be the manner of the singing. So there's the so-called operatic style, which tends to have more vibrato, and opera singers tend to not use microphones or ways to amplify their voices, as opposed to musical theatre singers. But there is so much overlap. For example, in the 2021 festival, we performed an opera called Trouble in Tahiti, where it's by Leonard Bernstein, who also wrote West Side Story. And though Bernstein defines it as an opera, and he defines West Side Story as a musical theatre, you know, there's so much similar music in there, and the styles overlap. And we put on that opera just to show that opera is a very, very broad canvas. And, you know, it's sometimes defined as a very specific form, but actually it's one of the most versatile art forms out there. So it's a broad overlap, and whether opera the word opera puts people off, I think that's probably right. I think the problem with opera is, and it's not alone in this, but it's very expensive to put on, and because it's very expensive to put on, you know, people have historically been forced to have high ticket prices, and because people have high ticket prices, it's seen as elitist. And because it's seen as elitist, it doesn't get much funding historically, and therefore the ticket prices have to be high, and the circle rolls on, and it's a never-ending circle, which it's very hard to break. But you know, we're one of many opera companies around the UK who are hoping to try and break down that stereotype. We work really hard to get a lot of external funding so that we can put on reasonably cheap operas. So you know, ticket prices probably revolve around about £15, £15, which, you know, compared to a lot of operas around the world is pretty affordable, I feel. And hopefully with those prices, you know, people can feel that they can afford to come.
There's a great debate and Q&A and thing going on in chat there as well, which I won't overread, but have a look at that too, everybody. Jay's got his hand up and Ian has as well. So Jay first.
Yeah, just to ask Joe, in terms of the type of song you're looking for, because obviously you're saying it has to be for mezzo soprano. Is it sort of, are you looking for something that's fairly sort of traditional operatic style, something that's a bit more the modern folk style of some of the operatic singers, or is it fairly open to the interpretation of the composer?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're all ears, really. We deliberately didn't put on any kind of stylistic necessities for it on the advertisement. So I think we're all ears. I think the main thing we're looking for in the first page of the composition and the previous examples is just someone who has real creativity and someone who has ideas. And I think the one thing I would say is that the recital as a whole is Cumbria opera and song. So as long as it's a composer who, can celebrate Cumbria and does want to celebrate Cumbria, it's a celebration about the fact that opera does happen here and can happen here. And that's something we really want the composition to embody, really.
Yeah, and does it need to be an original song, or would you be happy also with like settings of poetry or existing text, or are you looking for purely original?
The text is completely up to the composer. We'd obviously have to sort out the finer details as and when we got the winner. So obviously, if it were a poem that was in copyright, we'd have to sort out paying the poet, and we'd be completely open to doing that. But whichever poem the composer chose, really, as long as they outlined that in their little brief, which they sent as part of the application. It can be a new poem written by the composer too. It can be a poem by a living Cumbrian poet, one of Katie Hale's poems, for example, or it could be something by, I don't know, William Wordsworth or a poet from long ago. Really, whatever the composer felt would illustrate their work really well.
Thanks, Joe.
Cheers, thanks.
Ian.
Just not to drag this out, but I was part of a national review team that looked into opera and ballet in 1912 or something. That was important because it actually got evidence. There's a lot of preconceptions about what people think about opera. Audience Agency did a huge piece of work with people, which, as usual, showed that the audiences were not stupid, and it was quite nuanced. It wasn't, yes, we like it, no, we don't. But very few people indeed on the national basis said that they'd be interested enough in going to see opera. And I'm making no comments on that at the moment. I think opera has been very poorly served by its leadership, because at the time we did the study, the Royal Opera House and the E&O received subsidy to a tune of about £100 per attender. And over 90% of the attenders at those two venues were either visitors from abroad or people in the top 1% of earners in the country, which is just unsustainable and unfair. Whereas elsewhere in the country, other opera companies, the small companies like yours, Joe, is doing fantastic work, which is extremely progressive and good, but suffering from that kind of feeling that opera is only about the elite and what they can afford, hundreds of pounds per ticket. So I just say I think opera's got a good opportunity now to actually become more of an art form of the people, as it was in Italy, for example. But there still is a lot of rearguard recidivism. The battle lines that have been drawn up around the E&O actually demonstrate the problem, because it's all about politicians and ridiculous people like the ex-DCMS Secretary of State, who probably isn't interested in opera at all, but is jumping on a bandwagon of a particular class. So it's really difficult for opera, and I would just say keep on going, because you're doing all the right things. It's some of the people, because the other thing about the Royal Opera House, is their costs are preposterous. There are direct comparators with West End theatres, commercial theatres, that pay a fraction for their upkeep and management that ROH and E&O does. And all of that, it doesn't come out into the open. It's just stuff about, oh, you're killing an art form, you're killing an art form. They are preposterously self-indulgent.
Okay. Thank you, Ian, for that observation. I'm conscious of time, and I can see people nodding in agreement, I think, around the room as well. Kate, did you want to mention about Helping Hands and the work you've been doing with the Cumbria Opera Group, because you're leading that project, aren't you? And obviously there are other people on the Helping Hands project on this call as well.
Yeah, so I just whilst you're here, Joe, and you've turned sideways, Joe.
Oh, carry on, Kate.
I think it's I think it's fantastic that you're bringing opera to Cumbria, and so all power to your elbow. Your little company is part of the Volunteering Futures Helping Hands project that I run with my day job hat on, along with Jay and Verity, who are here on the call. Give us a wave, Jay and Verity. So just tell us a little bit about where you fit into the Helping Hands project and how it's kind of working for you, just in a moment.
Yeah, so Helping Hands is a fantastic initiative of bringing volunteering opportunities closer to those who haven't been able to access it before. And we recently did a Opera Highlights concert in Carlisle and then in Kendal, and a team of absolutely outstanding volunteers came and helped us in those 2 concerts. And honestly, Lucy and I can't speak more highly of those volunteers. They're absolutely exceptional. So we're really, really proud and pleased to be part of the Helping Hands project.
Good. And we're so glad to have you, because you bring a whole sort of breath of fresh air, and a different kind of activity and a different approach, which is just brilliant. So thank you for being part of the project. Okay, Tom.
Thanks, Kate. And Joe, Mahogany Opera, Amy's just put a note in there. I'm assuming you're across Mahogany Opera, who have a sort of administrative base at Rosehill at Whitehaven.
Yeah, we know them. We haven't worked with them yet, but we know them, and I have attended some of their operas in the past. Very great opera company too. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So it's always about connections on this call. And I'm always keen to make sure people know who everybody else is. Thank you very much, Joe, and good luck with the competition, which I think runs to end of March. Is that right?
Yeah, deadline is 31st of March. Yeah.
Okay. So if everybody can help spread the message about that, there's information, I think, on the Facebook page, and I'm pretty sure there's probably a link in there that Amy's put in as well about that competition. That would be terrific. 2 more messages from me. One is, don't forget the quarterly meeting, which is booking up. I think we've got over 30 people booked up already for that now. That's going to be at Sunbeams near Reged. And it's on March the 3rd, and it's a free lunch. And we've got really good, I'll be publishing the agenda probably in the next week or so. We've got a really nice list of people talking at that, but also most importantly, lots of space to talk, discuss, disagree, debate about dynamism and how the cultural sector here in Cumbria is reacting to the cost of living crisis. How are we all evolving, changing? Lancaster Litfest Festival, good example, I would suggest, of how they've taken a different approach to their festival this year. So look out for that March 3rd. If you can make it, there's help with travel costs, if that's a barrier to your coming as well. If you can make it, it'd be fantastic to see you face to face, and we can all see actually how tall we all are, rather than all thinking we're all the same height on Zoom calls. So it'd be great to see you there.